Hi there, I'm Richard Hill, the host of eCom 1, and welcome to episode 179. Yep, we made it, 179. Now, in this episode, I'll speak with Janus Basnov, Chief Sales Officer at Aristo Sourcing. Working in the corporate world and managing teams and projects for the likes of Concentrix and IBM for well over a decade, Janus now heads up Aristo, placing and training top talent around the world with eCom store owners and businesses. He's also part of the amazing team that organises the best SEO event I've ever been to, SEO Mastery, all the way over in Vietnam. Now, we talk how outsourcing talent can help an e-commerce business scale and how to find the right talent. Janus' framework for instilling best practices and developing a strong work culture with a remote team. And it's much, much more than SOPs and Slack groups. Then we flip it over to events, how Janus' team organised what was becoming one of the biggest SEO events in the world, with SEOs flying to Vietnam to mingle with over 450 other attendees. And his insights to sell even more tickets and get sponsors on board. We cover it all. An absolute cracker once again. Now, if you enjoy this episode, hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you're listening to this podcast. You're always the first to know when a new episode is released. Now, let's head over to this fantastic episode. Hi, Janus, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really well. Well, thanks for coming on the show. We are literally the opposite sides of the world today. Where are you? You want to tell our listeners where you're at today?
I am in Da Nang in Vietnam at the beach.
Wow.
Well, obviously not at the beach right now, but right by the beach.
Yeah. How cool is that? Now I know we've got an absolute cracking episode ahead of us. Now I met Janus about 12 months ago almost at the SEO Mastery event way back 12 months ago. I thought, as soon as I met you, we've got to get you on the podcast and talk about all things outsourcing and sort of remote working and how apt that you're in probably one of the beautifulest areas in the world in Vietnam. So looking forward to hearing maybe a bit more about that. But before we do, I think it'd be great for you to introduce yourself, Janus, and how you got into the world of outsourcing, event organising, and e-commerce.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me, Richard. My name is Janus. I'm Danish from origin, but since 2007, my home base have been in Scotland. So I moved to Scotland to work for IBM at the time in the call center. And a couple of years after I moved there, another Danish guy came from Ireland at the time to join the team I was on. And we became really good friends. And he started talking about stuff like affiliate marketing and building websites, and I didn't really care. I didn't really pay attention or care. And then in January 2014, he left the company to move to the Philippines to start an outsourcing agency. And when he said that, I was like, well, I mean, this sounds pretty interesting. But also, how nuts are you to just, root out, leave everything and move to the Philippines? That sounds absolutely crazy. But when he left, he said, look, when I make enough money in the business, I'll take you with me. I'll bring you in the business. And I just it's like, fine, whatever. I had a good time at IBM. I was running contact center teams. I was managing teams. I was, dealing with clients. I was having a really good career and really enjoyed my life. But then in 2017, he called me and said, I actually think we should do this next year. So he gave me kind of like a year's heads up. And then in 2018, I quit my job. In September 2018, I quit my job and joined Aristo Sourcing. Obviously, in the beginning, kind of learning what to do and how to do it. But then, since middle of 2019, I think, I've been full-time running the sales operations of Aristo Sourcing.
So literally 10 years plus in the sort of corporate world. I mean, IBM doesn't get much more corporate than that, does it, to be fair? And then some geezer that you met at work who's like your mate and obviously best friend now, says, right, I'm moving to the Philippines. I've set this business up. Do you want to join? A year later, you join, and here you are sort of 8 years later. Obviously, I know your business partner pretty well as well. You're sort of obviously 8 years into running various things. Obviously, we're going to talk about those now. But that must have been quite a decision at the time.
Yeah, and it was terrifying. I'm very much like a safety first kind of person. I don't really take chances in life, whether it's finances or anything else. But my eyes have been open to a different way of living, and I'm trying to embrace it. I love it. So.
Yeah. Do you know, that's funny you say that, because obviously I do know Janus quite well. We've been to a few conferences together now and spent a lot of time together. And I would say, you are a very calculated in a good way, like safe person is my interpretation in like a very thought out and very organized and very astute to things. So that would have been quite a like, wow, what are you? But I bet your family were like, what are you doing?
Yeah, they were surprised. And you know, as parents are, they were a little bit nervous on my behalf and like, oh, how's it going to work out? And also I think, and you probably meet that as well, like the world we operate in, like the online world, there's a whole generation and a lot of people from all generations actually that don't understand how that can even be a business or a profitable way of living. And then when you add in, you know, right now, as we talked about in the beginning, I'm at Da Nang in Vietnam. When you add in the fact that you can work from anywhere in the world, people's minds are just blown.
Yeah. I mean, even now for me, you know, I've been in the space for over 20 years, and some of the people I've met at your events and other events that we've been to together, and, you know, some of the things that you're just sitting speaking to somebody in a co-working space that might have 50 people working for them, and he's there in his shorts and his flip-flops and his laptop and his pad thai, you know, just chilling. You're like, so what do you do, dude? And he's like, oh, well, you're like, no way. You know, he's... You assume that they may be there for the conference, and you go, so where do you live? And they go, oh, well, no, I've been here for 4 years. I've been here for 5 years. And it sort of opens your eyes, you know, these sort of things. So looking forward to jumping into some of that. So obviously our listeners, e-com store owners, marketeers, you know, how can, you know, in simplest forms, how can sort of outsourcing talent from around the world, you know, really sort of help e-com store owners and marketeers?
So I think there's a couple of avenues to go down there. So there's one where we talk about a global talent pool. So you have the opportunity to find the best possible talent in a worldwide pool instead of in Lincoln. Like, so you have all of a sudden now a big pool of, you know, theoretically 7 billion people that could all work for you. And you can find the best of them instead of the best in your village or in your town or city. So I think that's one bit. And there's obviously a cost element. So, you know, the countries, so we hire from the Philippines and South Africa. You could also hire from like ex-Yugoslavia, or you could hire from India. There's lots of different kind of options for this kind of outsourcing work. But you pay a completely different salary for people with the same or maybe even better qualifications than what you can hire locally. So that's that I think for me, that's the main benefits is there's a cost element and there's a bigger talent pool.
I think it's an interesting one because, you know, I guess obviously COVID's changed a few things, but still, if you want, you know, if you're used to just recruiting in your town, your city, and you're quite specialist, like e-commerce is quite specialist, obviously, right, we want to find a developer in our city. There might be 30 of them, you know, whereas you open that, or more or less, but, you know, a smallish number, you open that talent pool up to the whole of South Africa and Philippines in the examples you gave. You've now got 1,000 people to source from, or 10,000, or obviously it really makes sense. And then obviously different sort of costings around the world, cost of living and salaries and things like that goes without saying. So definitely makes sense on the commercial side and on the sort of talent pool side. But I think a lot of people will still be like, yeah, well, I knew that. That's quite straightforward, you know. But I'm still a bit concerned about sort of jumping into that and managing those people. You know, what would you say to those guys and girls that are sort of, well, it's just not quite that easy though?
First of all, I'd probably say that it is actually that easy. So try it out. I think, I mean, we've just been through a couple of years with a global pandemic where most of us worked like for 6-12 months at home and did everything fully remotely. And I think we can all agree that for a lot of businesses, it wasn't ideal, but everyone made it work. And that's kind of like when you outsource talent, or you work with outsourced talent, it's a little bit the same, right? It's like you can't go in and tap them on the shoulder in the office in the morning. You can't, you know, share a lunch or a cake at the afternoon tea, but you can get 95% of the way there with some of the same tools we all used during the pandemic for chats, like video chats like this, Zoom meetings, Microsoft Teams meetings, etc., etc. And then it's just about building a process that enables you to have these people as part of your core team. So like make them, you know, have small teams within your team where they're part of it, you know, daily meetings, stand-ups. I think there's a lot of ways to, I mean, a lot of the things we look at as inhibitors is just a cultural thing, or like this is not how we used to do it thing. Obviously, I say that because I now work with outsourced talent. But even like when you think about, like when you call your bank, you call a team in India or in the Philippines. Like you're not going to get someone in the UK anymore. If you call EE or Vodafone, it's the same, right? I used to work for the company that provides those call centers. TripAdvisor customer support, India, Philippines. So it's just like it's just the world we live in. And why? So I mean, they obviously said 200 people in the same office, but why should that be significantly better than hiring someone in South Africa who sits on their own, right? And who has the perfect working conditions because they get to arrange their life around it, right? So all the people that South Africa is still a relatively young market for outsourcing. So the people we hire there see this as a great opportunity for them to work from home. They can raise their life around it. You know, maybe they don't need to have like care for the children because they're in the house. So there's a lot of benefits to them. So which means salaries is a little bit lower than what they would have to charge if they worked in an office in Cape Town, which is quite expensive city to live in. And Philippines on the opposite have done this for many years. So there's a lot of people there with a lot of experience working remotely, and they'll be able to almost guide you into how that should be done, right? So I think as with any business, it's all about having strong processes in place to manage it. And then everyone is slightly different. You're different. The people that listen to this are all different. They'll need different people to work with. And the people you hire, the BAs or the outsourced talent you hire, are all going to be different personalities. So it's about finding out what works for them and what works for you.
Yeah. I guess it's that, if you've not done it before, there's that little bit of an unknown, but as Janus says, sort of what we got to lose, really. Give it a try. We do it in, the guys that are listing and the guys that work with us that are maybe listing, we have an international team, and obviously a lot bigger UK team, but it's something we're exploring and working with Janus and the team to build out our teams in different countries. Yeah.
And think about like South Africa is the same time zone, right? So you're getting same time zone. You're getting people with a UK English, like it's South Africa, they speak British English, and they have an understanding of the British culture. Like for all the badness it is, it's a former UK colony, right? So or part of the empire, so to speak. So they understand.
So when we many listeners that realise that South African, outsourced to South Africa, I think a lot of people think further afield, like Southeast Asia potentially is a very strong, known for probably 15 years. I think we probably had people out there and work with various people via different outsourcing platforms and whatnot. So obviously getting the right talent in the first place, obviously that's partly where you can come in as a business. That's a service I know you guys offer, but the guys that are listening in, how do they sort of make sure that they've got the right person in the first place? And then how key is it really in those first few months that how well that onboarding is done?
So I think first thing is to make sure you have a very clear understanding of what you're looking for. So look at your business and think about a little bit depending on what you're hiring for, but look at like what tasks are repetitive, what tasks are something that I would be happy to have someone else do, not because they're not important, but because the value I can do in my business, selling or meeting clients, is more valuable than when I sit and key in addresses of customers in my CRM or where do outreach to potential clients or whatever it might be, right? So there's a lot of things in your business that is relatively low value work, and that's what I would outsource first. So look first to outsource that. Then once you're comfortable with that, we hire sales SDRs, sales development representatives in South Africa. So we got a couple of Irish eCommerce companies that we hire SDRs for in South Africa.
Wow,
right? So
that's a great tip.
So we hire salespeople. South Africans are very good at that. They are, I kind of, typically I try and say they're a little bit like Dutch people. So they're very open and they walk into people openly. So I think they're very good for that. So think a lot about what you're trying to outsource and then document it. So document your SOPs. The better SOPs you have, the more successful your outsourcing is going to be. So have very clear SOPs and understanding of results you're expecting them to achieve. So it's slightly different with the Philippines and South Africa. So I'll come back to your point in a minute about how you onboard them. But for the Philippines, you want very strong SOPs, and you want a very fixed like expectation of work, because the Philippines culturally are not very good at asking questions or taking initiative. I mean, there's obviously exceptions, but that's like a cultural thing for them, that they really like to follow instructions, and they respect authority a lot. South Africans slightly different. It's a more Western mindset. They're open to asking questions. They'll try their own things on their own, and you can set them goals rather than tasks, right? So for a South African, you say, well, I want to get 10 new customers this month, and they'll go and source the customers. You probably still have to get them the tools and the means to get there, but they understand how to get to a result rather than just following the process. So that's the main difference. So you talked about onboarding. So there's a couple of things you need to understand. Is like the first few months when you outsource, you need to spend a lot of time with them. Again, it varies from hire to hire and from role to role. Like if they're doing your bookkeeping, you maybe don't need to spend that much time with them, because it's a very fixed kind of understanding of work. And if they have a bookkeeping background, they know what they're doing. Unless you have a really complex bookkeeping system in your company, of course. But for other roles, you might, like if they're doing your sales, you might want to spend quite a lot of time coaching them and make sure that they speak the language of your company, and they're selling in the right way. So yeah, depending on the role. But what I typically say to people is like, you need to be ready to spend a lot of time the first 3 to 4 weeks, particularly. Daily meetings, follow up with them, making sure they understand what you're expecting of them. Probably to some extent looking through their results and their work. Mats that I work with, and you know well, like one of the things we talk a lot about is, outsourcing responsibility rather than outsourcing tasks, right? So specifically, especially with the South Africans, it's about getting them to understand that they have a responsibility to achieve a certain result for your company, whatever role they're in. If they're bookkeeping, the responsibility is to make sure the books are right and there's no problems. If it's sales, there's probably some sales targets you want to achieve. If they're doing editing for your content, like if you like a business that writes a lot of content, you can get them to edit that and make sure it's written in the right language, etc. So there's a lot of kind of different roles for where you can get them responsibility rather than tasks.
I would imagine now our listeners are very much like, okay, that's a lot of ideas. I think obviously there's a lot of things within any e-commerce store, whether that's the design side. You've got your dozens of categories, subcategories, and the look and feel of those categories. There's a design element of that. So create, just as an example, creating a SOPs, how you like those done, but obviously maybe giving them, obviously you're giving them the standard operating procedures, which I think most people, when you say SOPs, I think most businesses have a bit of a cold sweat with that, because, oh God, how boring a job can that be?
No, and there's an element here where many, I mean, if you're a big e-commerce store, you probably have them, but maybe some of the smaller e-commerce businesses out there don't even really have SOPs, because it's kind of organically grown company, and everyone's kind of, you just learn how to do things. And that's where the challenge in South Africa is really good, because they are open to like a slightly more chaotic working environment, because they grasp things in a different ways. Where the Philippines really like things to be neat and in boxes.
Yeah, no, I would completely concur with the Philippine side of things with our team. We have to, we've got some great people there, but structure, SOPs. So any sort of little tools and tricks for doing SOPs and creating them? Because obviously some things can be quite a long set of actions to get the output. Did you have like any software you recommend or anything for creating SOPs?
I mean, the cheat right now is to use AI, right? Use like ChatGPT or one of the many AI tools, and basically just feed them your processes, like upload documents with the processes, and ask them to create an SOP. I think another thing what we quite often do when we hire people for ourselves is we just record small videos. So for every task, we'll record a small video, like a 1-minute video. So every time they do, especially for our Filipino VAs, that works really well. So every time they need to do something that's repetitive, they can just watch that video and see how it's done. So that's quite a nice little way of doing it. And then you can use tools like Asana, Trello, etc. to kind of manage your project flow, right? No,
that's great. So we've got a very strong onboarding at the beginning is absolutely key. That first sort of 4, 5, 6, 8 weeks, obviously setting the expectations, well-documented SOPs, and obviously sort of giving, different nationalities, maybe some more direction and more SOP and more detail and more task focus maybe. But then also, obviously with those guys in time, giving them more responsibility, but then different nationalities that want the more responsibility can give, more of an input. Obviously it depends on what seniority these people are coming in.
Yeah.
We've got somebody in the Philippines that's been an SEO manager for about 12 years, and she's fantastic. She sort of knows her stuff, obviously, brilliantly. So it's, less documentation required because of the experience she's got. I just wanted to introduce you very quickly to our sponsors, Pricing. Now, Pricing is a competitor price tracking and monitoring software that can dynamically change a product's prices on all sales channels. They work with brands such as Samsung, Sony, Suzuki to increase their online revenue. Now, if you run Google Shopping, which I know a lot of you absolutely do, this software is absolutely key to accelerating profits. One of the reasons I recommend Pricing to my clients is because you can find out your competitors' pricing and stock availability all in one simple to understand dashboard, giving you a huge competitive advantage. Now, if you have any inquiries and questions about this software, or you're ready to get cracking, we have worked out a very, very special deal for our listeners where you can get a free month's trial and then 25% off for the first 3 months. Head to ecom1.com pricing and complete the inquiry form, and we will connect our listeners to the Pricing team. Right, let's head straight back to the episode. But yeah, so if you're on the fence, obviously we'll talk at the end how you can reach out to Janus and the team. But it's something I know I'm probably about 18, 20 years into hiring people for different things, and my mentality, it sounds like I've read another self-help book, but is when I go to say events, for example, and I do a lot of events, as I think a lot of our listeners will know that listen, and I talk about it a lot, and I come up with an idea. It's like, well, who is going to do that for me? Not, am I going to do that? So it's like the who is going to do that. And I might not have the who, and I might not know the person, but I'm going to find it in a pool of 10,000 people in a certain country so then finding that person and then obviously maybe giving them a test task to start with, and I used to do something where if I was, we'll talk about this actually, but when I was putting job ads out there for international team going way back, you would sometimes get like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications, and it was clear they hadn't read the application. They're just hitting apply, copy, paste. So I would always put a sentence at the end, and it would say, if you've read this fully, in your subject line back to me, please put the word ninja.
So that's quite a common thing. That's quite a common trick to use. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously,
and then you'd look at all the replies. If it was like 5 ninjas out of 100 replies, delete 95 replies. They haven't looked at the detail. Yeah.
So obviously, I think you should go through an agency like ourselves, right? Our recruitment manager has been there for 10 years and stuff. But even if you just want to try it out, like go on something like Upwork and hire talent, right? You can also hire UK talent there. But just to try out what remote work is like, and if you can work with someone remotely, it's a good way to test it. And then, Upwork doesn't like it, but you can get people off Upwork, right? Get their email address or something. And
that's exactly how we started with it. We'd put a little task on, trying to think, probably in the early days, some of the things might be more around web. We don't do anything to do with web design now, but maybe 15 years ago we did, or maybe no less than that, probably about 8 years we did. So I want a WordPress site building, I'd put a job on Upwork, and it would be, need a WordPress developer that can do this. Obviously a nice strong brief, quite detailed, but then put in the request, the ninja little trick, if you like, and then whittle it down, look at their portfolio. But, I probably wouldn't start with a website if it was somebody new. I would start with something smaller, because obviously that's a big ask if they can't then deliver. But I think obviously working with an agency that's been there and done it like yourself, obviously that can really speed things up. So there's a couple of different ways to work with you guys, isn't there? Do you want to explain those?
Yeah, so we essentially have two basic models. One where we just hire for you, so we just charge you a one-off fee for hiring, and we'll go and find talents, give you 3 to 5 good candidates after we pre-screened them, tested their home internet and IT setup. All these things. We've done an interview with them. We'll share the CVs with you, and then you decide who you want to interview, etc. And then we charge you once you decide to hire, right? So we don't charge you up front, and if we don't find a successful candidate, we're not going to charge you. And then the other option is that we employ them for you. You still manage them on an operational point, but we employ them, and then we just charge you monthly.
But you pay them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We pay them. We take care of any HR issues. If for whatever reason down the line you want to replace them, or they resign or something, we'll find a replacement with no extra cost. Those kind of things. We typically pay our remote staff twice a month, especially in the Philippines. They like that. But it's just, whatever.
Yeah. So 2 options, really. And I think that's a great sort of, people might not realize that obviously, because they might think, I've got to pay in a different, obviously certain countries want paying in a certain way. If you've never used, Wise.com, I know is quite popular, but PayPal, but certain countries don't like that.
We have bank accounts and we have bank accounts in old currencies, right? So we can charge you in pounds. Yeah. So you can just pay.
So you take all that hassle away. You're just paying obviously you're sending an invoice to your client, and then you're there. Obviously, if that was me, I'd be paying you a monthly fee, and then you would then pay the team member that you've got me in whatever country it may be. And obviously there's a difference, which is your bit. But then we're working with them operationally on a day-to-day basis. You're taking care of all the sort of HR, the initial onboarding, the interviewing and that. Because that's a big piece, isn't it? Where you are, if you're putting that advert out, like I say, and you've got 100 people, okay. And then you go down to 5 or 2, and then you're interviewing. But then maybe human nature, you're not going to get it right every time. Yeah. Maybe not a lot to start with either. You take all that pain away by sort of saying, look, we'll obviously cast the net out there, shortlist, interview, introduce you if you like them, and they're happy to pass this, that, and the other test to start with. Their internet's great. The internet is an interesting one. We quite often have our team in the Philippines. Sorry, I'm going to be late. Internet's gone, and and it happens. But sometimes theirs is better than ours. It's just how it is, isn't it? We've had some fun with recording this podcast, haven't we? with the internet.
Both on your side and on my side this time. So.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? That is quite an interesting one. The actual internet went at my end when we before. You won't probably know that listening to this, because we'll have our man Dan, who's the man behind the scenes who edits everything, will make it look very pizzazz. Okay, so we've got the hiring options with you guys, and obviously, but also that one-off fee option with you guys as well, where you'll find somebody for our listeners, and obviously it's just a one-off fee. So that's brilliant. So okay, I'm just trying to think where best place to go next. So I think let's jump over to events now. Obviously, we've got the outsourcing side of your business, but then events. This is where we met. And I actually, I talk about events a lot, and I think, I was literally on Facebook one day, probably 13 months ago, scrolling like you do. I've actually took Facebook off my phone, by the way. Yeah, I don't know if I told you that. So you'll struggle to get hold of me on Facebook, WhatsApp. I took it off in December. I'll get
too many conference ads that you were too tempted to buy.
I'm a sucker for adverts. Yeah, my credit card's a lot happier. But I saw an advert for a conference, SEO conference. I'm like, oh yeah, that's obviously my passion, SEO and agency life. So and it was in Vietnam of all places. So I'm like, oh my gosh, always wanted to go to Vietnam. And it was a place that I'd actually booked a ticket to 20 years ago. To the actual city, and I was unwell and I couldn't go. So SEO and Vietnam, I was like, I've got to go to this conference. I had like 2.5 weeks before the event, I think it was, give or take. Booked the ticket, sort of breached the topic with my wife. She was sort of okay, but and that's where I met Janus. So Janus runs with his team SEO Mastery in Ho Chi Minh, in Saigon, and that's where we met. But obviously running events, we talk about it quite a lot even as an eCom store, running an event, building a community around your business. I think let's step through that. Why did you initially decide to sort of start doing events as well as the outsourcing?
Yeah. So I think there's a little bit of history where, so in 2018 when I joined the company, literally my first job was to fly to Thailand. So 2 weeks after I joined the company, I went to Thailand to join two conferences. The first one, so there's a community of entrepreneurs called the Dynamite Circle. It's a little bit closed off. It's a little bit secret. But if you know, you know, and if you don't, look it up. There's like some revenue targets you need to meet to be in it and stuff. But it's basically a community of entrepreneurs who embrace the entrepreneurial remote work lifestyle. And there's people who do almost anything. So they had the conference in Bangkok. So I went to that first, and then went to Chiang Mai for the Chiang Mai SEO conference, which is probably the biggest pure SEO conference. There's some of you might know the affiliate world conferences. They are a lot bigger, but they also there's people with a lot of money paying for them. But the Chiang Mai SEO conference, so I went to that in Chiang Mai, where I know you were out there a couple of months ago as well. And that was kind of my first SEO conference I went to, and that was smashing. It was an amazing event. I met a lot of new people. My mind was blown. I went again in 2019. And then obviously, as we all know, in January 2020, so the pandemic hit. And very quickly we realized that there's like a whole conference circuit of conferences that people go to. Like a lot of them are the same people, a lot of new people. So after Chiang Mai SEO, there's something in January, March, and then we go to Europe for the summer, and then go back out to Asia in October, November. And there, all of a sudden there's nothing. So Matt's, who I work with and who has a massive network in the SEO community, was like, let's put on a virtual conference. So we did that very quickly. We put that together in 2020 and launched it, and it was pretty successful. So we did it again we did it 6 months later, for the end of 2020. And then we kind of like world opened up again, but conferences still got cancelled. Matt said that then after the pandemic, he moved to Ho Chi Minh City and build a life there. And he said, this is an amazing place. We need people to come and see it. We need people who are nomads, digital nomads. We need people who are in the SEO world, e-commerce. Anyone who works online needs to come and see how great this is. So he's like, let's put on a conference. And that was the one we had last year in March. And he's like, let's try and put that on and see if we can get people to come to Vietnam. Like every time you put on a conference, you can put on a conference in London and there will be people coming. You can put on in Miami and people will come, or Dubai and people will come. But Ho Chi Minh City is like, who wants to go to Vietnam, right? People don't necessarily know about it, and what they know, they've seen in American movies from the 70s and 80s. So we like, let's try and put it on, and we put on an event for just under 300 people. I was like, will we figured it would be safe and stuff. And I'll be honest, like we ran ads. We did everything, and like 2 months before the conference, we sold 25% of the tickets, and we were breaking it. We were like, what are we going to do? But then actually, the ads started working.
Don't I know it?
Yeah. But I also think word of mouth started working. And obviously, again, our community, like the SEO community, is large, but also relatively small. So there's a lot of people talk and people go. So we managed to sell out a couple of days before the conference. And it was an absolute smashing event. There was so much stress from like running it, because it was the first time we ran a physical conference. So it's like, I'll tell you a few of the things. Like the night before, we sat up until 1 a.m. making badges. So the plastic badges with your name on stuff. We hadn't thought about that until very late, and we had like last minute tickets and stuff. So we did that super late. There's a cool backdrop in the foyer of the hotel where you could take pictures, like the SEO Master Summit. Picture taken, Richard. So you'll find that somewhere on Richard's social media. Great picture of us. But like the company that came to put that up drilled holes in the floor and the wall of the hotel, putting it up without asking anyone. So it's like there's all these like small things here. There's like the hotel. We only like literally as the conference started, the hotel was like, oh, should there be vegetarian and vegan options? And like, of course there should be, right? So there's a lot of these things that are very, very last minute kind of thing. It was exhilarating, and meeting, almost 300 people. Some that travel halfway around the world, someone who traveled, only a few hundred miles or from other parts of Asia. That all came together with a networking and a sharing mindset. So that was like, sometimes when you go to these conferences, people don't want to share their secrets because they found the way to do something really well, and they don't want anyone else to do it. But I think at this conference, everyone started with Matt, who was the conferencier and kind of the main speaker of the conference. and he kind of opened up right away and said, this is what this conference is going to be about. We're going to be sharing, we're going to be telling each other what we're doing, and that mentality comes from the Dynamite Circle. In Dynamite Circle, you talk about your failures rather than your successes. The failures is what we learn the most from, and in SEO, there's a tendency to talk only about your successes. So there's a lot about, you want to be open and sharing these kind of things. And I think that made it a truly unique conference. I've been to quite a few conferences now, and
it was special.
The friendships and like last year, like you and I, Richard, right? We would probably never met, right?
No.
But now we talk regularly, and we look forward to seeing each other again next month, right? And some of the friendships I've made there, it's incredible. And I think it comes from that encouragement to be vulnerable. And I think that's what we did well at that conference.
Yeah, it was special. I mean, like you say, a lot of people have flown in from you name country. But obviously some people have come, from around the corner, a whole mix of expertise, and success, and people starting out, and just that real sort of camaraderie of helping people. You worked in, I don't know, this year you're doing it as well, sort of a mastermind afternoon, day, which I think is brilliant. There's nothing better than, it's similar to the first point, really, sitting down and having a heart-to-heart, right, this is my business. These are some of the challenges and some of the things that I'd like some help with or to discuss. And then you've got a smaller group within this 300 or, 200, 300, 400. I think you've got about 450 coming this year, haven't you? So, and then sitting, and I was in a group, and you sort of, I found it, just really nice to be able to talk about my business, but with people that can help from all different angles. There's guys that are doing very similar to me, in a very different country, and then there's guys that are doing elements of what I'm doing, guys that don't know my business type at all, but they all added so much value. And just one or two of the comments and discussions in that sort of couple of hours was a real game changer. I came away from that conference and set up a new part of our business, which just got live. Literally, we've spent, and I outsourced the work that needed to be done to get the things done. I found out about the tools and the sort of tech that part of the business is built on by somebody that I met there that we both know very well, that does very well. That's why I've got sort of proof of concept, because they're doing, multi-millions a year with that type of business. So I got some validation and just and I'm thinking, and these guys are traveling the world doing it. So it's brilliant. But obviously events, as an eCom store owner, you're thinking, obviously going to events, guys, you've got to go to these events.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're selling,
like the value, so like a Take a Shower event is like, the top line price is $700, but it's always discounted, right? So it's typical e-commerce trick, where nothing costs what it says. And then obviously the travel and stuff, but you just need one tip to make that money back. You just need someone to tell you to do this thing different for your products to rank, or this thing slightly different to convert. Like, so it's like very, very simple things. Like, there's going to be people at the conference, like depending on what conference you go to, there's going to be CRO like experts that can rock your world. And if you can go from a 3% conversion to a 4% conversion, you can go to all the conferences in your life, right? So, I mean, So
I think I didn't coin this phrase, but I think I know somebody did, and I'm sort of going to steal it and adjust it slightly. But I think the more conferences you go to, the more money you will make. I think I actually genuinely believe that. I think somebody says the more holidays you have, the more money you make. But I think the more conferences you go to, but obviously it is about action. It's about being structured, having a good time, meeting people.
There's a clever thing. I can't remember who said it, so I'm not going to try and attribute it to someone. But I said, like, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
100%.
Right, so you should always try and be the dumbest person in the room, because then you learn more, right? Well, maybe not the dumbest, but definitely not the smartest. So you want to go to places where people are smarter than you. And these conferences, there are like a wide range of people. There are people who are just starting out, but there's also people who make more money than we could ever dream of.
Some of the talks, I literally felt like I was the dumbest person in the room. Yeah. And I was in that moment and in various moments. But then in those moments, that's where you're growing, you're learning. You're not just in that circle of that comfort. You're stepping it out. Saying, Jesus, I have no clue what this guy's on about. But I know if we connect that and we actually try this or buy that course and invest in that. I mean, Corey is one of your
I was
obviously
about to
speakers.
say, how far have you gone with Corey's course? But yeah,
we bought his courses.
Yeah.
3 of my team have gone through it, and I think he melted their brain, and I think they nearly quit, but they're still here.
I mean, he's the smartest guy at the moment. And it's funny with SEO. It's kind of, there's always these pivotal moments where someone rephrases something that we probably all knew, but in a way where you're like, Jesus, this is like, if I can implement this, I'm gonna make big money, or I'm gonna be able to change my life, or change my team's life, right? So
just getting that little advantage, and it's not always. It's not always. I think and that you go to these things and you'll learn something, but it's not maybe how they've shown it and taught it, and you're going to go back and copy that. You just know that you do this, and just that little 5% adjustment by adding that into the thing that we already do, is then change what you do massively, but you've not completely taken 100% of what that speaker said. You've taken a few snippets from it, a few little notes, and it's like, oh my God, why didn't we realize that little adjusting of the sale? Yeah.
So I think that's part of it. Part of it is what you get from the speakers, but then the networking. I mean, the main reason I go to conferences is the networking. You meet awesome people, and then 6, 8, 10 months down the line, you have a problem or a challenge or an opportunity, and you're like, actually, James that I spoke to at that conference is the right guy to go to now, either to share the opportunity with him, or to get his advice, or to get his input, or I'll call Richard and we'll talk about e-commerce, because I know Richard knows a lot about I don't know a lot about e-commerce personally. So it's just one of these things where you meet people that make you smarter. So for me, the networking is almost the best part about these conferences. We have some amazing talks. The speakers this year is on fire. And you get some of the best brains in the business. Yeah. And probably someone you hadn't heard about, which I think is always good to get a different perspective. But for me, the thing is what happens between the talks.
Yeah, totally. And I think it is sort of put yourself out there. It can seem, we're actually doing an event this evening. We've got about 70 people coming to our offices for just a more of a casual event, an evening thing. And I think it can be, if you're listening to this, I think, and you're a bit skeptical or maybe a little bit scared to go into an event. I think that's just quite normal, to go to an event maybe on your own, to go to the other side of the world on an event on your own. But then you have to appreciate that 90% of the other people there will be thinking the exact same thing. And these events are just so well organized and so well structured to sort of, smaller groups before the event, little smaller and different networking things for depending on what you're interested in. And you sort of find your people if you want, but you sort of got to get out. You got to get on that plane. You got to get to the hotel. Then you got to get out of that room and just turn up, and then get chatting. You
won't notice, Richard, but this year we'll have an app for the event, a bit like the one we used in Chiang Mai, where you'll be able to arrange meetups for people who are maybe in the same type of industry as you, or you do the same thing, or maybe I will definitely do like a beginners meetup for people who are at the first conference, and we'll come and talk and share our experiences and how you get most out of it. So don't be afraid. I mean, it's gonna be great, and people are gonna be don't worry about buying a fancy suit or something. People are gonna be in sneakers and shorts, like we're in Vietnam, and it's gonna be very hot and humid. So
it's t-shirt. You don't need to take any shirts, guys. I'm just telling you now, because it's so flipping up, but in a good way. Yeah. So maybe just for the guys that are maybe thinking of maybe coming along, obviously definitely connect with me, and Janus, and we'll take you out for a beer or two or whatever your sort of choice is. Maybe we'll arrange maybe a little meetup for the guys that have listened to this episode, an e-commerce stroke outsourcing meetup, and see if we can get a little group together. Let me know, guys, if you book. So those that maybe want to book for the event, what's the best way to do that, Janus?
SEOmasterysummit.com. I'm sure you'll put that in the show notes. But it's just our website is the easiest. As I said, the tickets are always discounted, but they do go up weekly or like bi-weekly as we get closer to the event, right? So
if you're listening to this sort of launch date of this episode, you've got about a month. So about a month before the you'll be in Vietnam. So hopefully see a couple of you there, a few of you there. So just a couple more questions on an event. So obviously definitely recommend going to the events. You know, it's definitely been instrumental in the growth of our business and me personally and the team, and great. But if our listeners are thinking, well, okay, I want to run my own events. It's something that totally I back. It's been instrumental to the growth of my businesses, not just this business, other things that I'm involved with. It can be obviously quite daunting. You were saying there, you're a few weeks out last time or first time, and you're 25% of tickets, and obviously getting people to events.
Yeah,
I know is the hardest, most stressful thing, because you're looking at the clock. We've got 45 days to go. We've got half tickets left.
Yeah.
Any advice around getting sort of, as we call it, bums on seats at events?
Yeah. So I think first of all, if you want to run events, go to events. Go to events and pick up what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong. Take mental notes, take physical notes, understand, speak to the event organizers. Everyone is happy to share. They won't share the numbers with you or if they're making a profit or a loss, but they'll share with you how they book speakers, how they this year our event will have a speaker trainer, someone who's going to coach, who's going to speak to all the speakers before the event, right? So there's all these little tricks that they will share with you. So speak to them first, go to conference and speak to the people arranging it. Speak to some of the volunteers and hear about their experience volunteering, and then build a team. You can't do this on your own. You need a team. You need someone that can do the physical, someone who can sit at the door and check tickets, someone who can hand out merchandise, someone who makes sure that you have the right speakers at the right time, someone who does IT, do sound, video, all these things. I think all of that up front, make sure you have a strong team around you, and then know that everything will go wrong the first time you do it. and just accept that, right? If you get too stressed about it, then that's not going to help anyone. So just be ready, especially the first time you do it. Be ready to be on your feet and be agile and flexible, and then it'll be good. And know that most of the people that are there, they won't notice that it's not smooth. You'll know you'll be stressing about it, but they won't notice. They will just be if you're I remember last year we had a problem, an IT problem, for 10 minutes where something didn't work. And everyone just chatted a bit, and no one mentioned it after, right? It's not been in any of the feedback. It's not something anyone remembers. You'll probably have forgotten about it until I told you now. But because it's not what people take away. People take away all the good stuff. They don't take away a minor thing. So yeah.
I think that's the mindset thing is there'll always be, definitely with events, there's a lot of moving parts. So there'll always be some stress points. I mean, we did an event a month ago, and we had 75 for the full day, and the day before, we were catering it, quite high-end catering. I think we had about £3,000 sort of food.
Oh, wow.
Lunch, we spent about £3,000 on lunch and agreed it all with the
get a lot for $3,000 in Saigon.
Yeah, that was for 70 people, but still, absolutely. But what had the day before, the venue said, no, we can't let the catering company use the space to do what you've asked because we haven't cleared the health and safety. Well, they hadn't told us we needed to clear the health. And what they wanted was the PAT test certificates and the certifications for the little grill they were bringing in. But there was no mention of that until about 24 hours before. So we're scrambling around thinking, oh my God, if he hasn't got this, and even if he has got this, they wanted them when he arrived to check all the PAT test dates on all the plugs. And if one plug hadn't been PAT tested, they would have refused entry to our chef basically to come in and cater. So it was oh my gosh, and we sort of pride our events on the sort of food quality and the quality of the venues and things like that. But that could have very easily we had no catering, so then it would have been what's plan B? But we'd have figured it out. We had a plan B, but it wouldn't have been anywhere as good, but it would have been okay, and then you will be up the night before till 1 a.m, setting up a stand and doing a thing, and it's just how it's
the way it is.
Yeah, to a degree, yeah. So obviously events can be, so depending on the size, the listeners are maybe thinking, right, well, I'll maybe start something small, 20, 30 people.
Yeah, you don't start with 450.
Yeah.
Or even 280, I would say.
And it's maybe industry specific, which makes sense. If you're an e-com store and you're trying to get, and you sell a certain type of products, an outdoor products, you want to do an outdoor sort of small event, and bring, you can bring journalists, you can bring, local people, obviously, but the people that are interested in that, people that you want to build relationships with, whether that's manufacturers, suppliers, distributors, brands. And obviously, when you start talking like that, you can then get potentially contribution and support from sponsors, and sponsors are, I think can play a big part in how big an event can be and what you can commit to. Obviously, agreeing to a hotel and a venue and catering, it can be quite chunky money.
Yeah.
Any tips around sort of securing sponsors and some of the things you've maybe done to secure sponsors?
I mean, it comes back to what I said before, like go to conferences and network with these people, because it's about relationships, right? So if you meet someone and they like you, they'll, for a lot of these companies, 5, 10, 15K sponsorship is not the end of the world. But it'll make a massive difference to your conference, right? So it's a small drop in their marketing budget, but a massive difference to you. But they won't know about you until you meet them. If you just send them like an email or a cold call saying, "Oh, I've got this conference," and they're like, "Who are you?" I don't know who you are. So they're not going to waste time with that. So social proof, and in this case, social proof is actually knowing these people and meeting them. And then obviously, once you run a conference a few times, you can raise the prices and you can go for, maybe bigger sponsors, because you can prove you have an event that's successful and it runs well. So,
but you're attracting potentially their customers. They'll then look at buying their service or their brand in an e-com space. Yeah. Well, that's I do think.
We talked a little bit about how to get the bumps and seats, right? So I think there's a couple of things you can do. So if you run a very local event, actually just flyers indoors, or call the, not at home, right, but call their businesses and invite them. Personal invitations. I think work really well in like a small local thing, and then PPC. Like a lot of our tickets are sold by Twitter and Facebook ads, or X as it now is ads. Because it's just about narrowing down your target, and as an e-commerce store, you already know how to do, or as an e-commerce brand, you already know how to do PPC probably. So it should be a doddle for you, just finding the right people for your conference. And as you know, and you're the example, Richard, it works.
Janus keeps taking my money.
You can afford it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a sucker for a conference, and I think that this, there's so many positives, but I think as an e-com store owner, agency owner myself, e-com store owner as well, over the years, we're just all so busy. We get so busy in the business, taking that time away, whether it's just jumping on a train and going to an event for a day and having a day away from the business, whether it's only, in London if you're in the UK, or whatever country for an hour somewhere and a day out, meeting like-minded people. But obviously that next level is jumping on a plane, disconnecting for maybe a few days or a couple of weeks if you can commit the time. The difference, I think, that makes to, obviously, the things you learn while you're there, the connections you make, just that one little idea that maybe at 1 o'clock in the morning in the bar that some guy mentioned about X, or that little snippet from that 1 hour talk, great. But just that time away thinking, do you know what, this industry, this business, the inspiration, you come back so fired up. It's like a recharge for another. Yeah. That's the way I also look at it. You come back and you're like, right, I'm good to go for another 3-6 months. You come back to your team, that passion and things you've learned, you're coming back to the team. Right, guys, I've got this idea and I've met this chap and he's done this and we're going to, and you're coming back with that renewed vigor, but with, some commercial, very much sort of commercial ideas. I'm a massive believer. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I agree.
So, yes, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think for those that want to find out more about Aristo Outsourcing and the conference, maybe one more time mention the conference URL and also the outsourcing. What's the best way to get all of you and connect?
So the conference, it's SEOmasterysummit.com, SEOmasterysummit.com. And then the company is aristosourcing.com. So ARISTO sourcing.com. And there's like a booking link for me. You can read all about our services and stuff, but then jump on a call with myself. That's how I do most of the business. So.
The outsourcing. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I like to finish every episode with a book recommendation. Do you have a book to recommend to our listeners?
I've got two, actually. I got one, which is like a business or like a personal development book, Getting Things Done. Probably a lot of you will know it, by David Allen. I think he's just put out a new version of it. But it's just I'd not actually implemented a lot of the things in the book, but it gave me the inspiration to look at my productivity and how I kind of structure my life. That was really good. Some of the things are easy to implement and some of them won't work for you at all. But just reading the book and getting challenged in the way that I organized my life and business was really interesting. And that just from a personal, like the book I probably enjoyed the most over the last 20 years is called The Dice Man by Luke Rhinehart.
I don't know.
Great book. Yeah, it's a great book. It's a guy, basically a guy who's like a psychology professor or something, and he decides one day, it's like, what if I lived my life by a dice roll? So every decision I make is by a dice roll. And it inspired me. It's probably one of the things that's helped me the most in terms of living this remote, digital nomad life. In that, no decisions are final, and you can try things out, and if they don't work, you can try something else out. We all, the whole carpe diem, right? We only live once, seize the day. And that bit kind of inspired me to make. There's a part of me that always wanted to do, like, go on a holiday, and every time, like, oh, do you want to go to Paris or Berlin today and roll a dice? But this was he's just taking that to the extreme, right? So it was really, really interesting, inspiring book.
That sounds very intriguing. Fantastic. Yeah. Well, thanks, Janus. I look forward to seeing you in about a month's time, and maybe a few of the listeners from this episode will catch up with those as well.
Yeah, great. We'll do. We'll meet up. That'll be good.
Yeah, fantastic. I'll see you in about a month.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cheers. If you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you are listening to this podcast. So you're always the first to know when a new episode is released. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you on the next one.